Okay, it appears we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Ernie Fuhr, and we're going to chat about his poem that's in the book Spooky Stories. And he may even read the poem for you. Um, and you know what? It's the day before Halloween. We'll probably talk about some other spooky stuff, have some fun here. So, Ernie, why don't you say hi, kind of tell people a little bit about what you've done as far as writing and stuff, and maybe talk about your poem a little.
Hi, Gary, and thanks for having me. I know we've been planning to do this interview for a while, and now we finally can. I have one poem in your most recent book, Spooky Stories,
Hmm.
and it's a poem called Spiritual Homestead, and I'll tell you kind of how that poem came about and what it's based on. Before this, I've collaborated with Gary on some other projects. Uh, there was an earlier spooky stories collection. I know I had a story in there called The Ghouls of Greenwood, and it's a true
That was in Spooky Rockford.
spooky
Yep.
Rockford. That was it.
Yep.
Yes. The Ghouls of Greenwood was about the old Forest Abbey mausoleum. True story. It was not kept up, and it had some very spooky and disastrous consequences. And that was really part of Rockford history. Most of what I write now is nonfiction, based on history or something that's factual. Okay. So that's why this poem is kind of a departure for me because I'm really not strong as a poet. And it's something that kind of came together. I'll tell you a little bit about this poem, though. Spiritual Homestead is based on um, a couple of apocryphal stories, if you will. By apocryphal, I mean stories that are spread by word of mouth, informally, urban myths. There's no factual or historical basis for them. Although in this case, I've tried to verify and document some things, but I've come up empty-handed. Now, Spiritual Homestead is about. It's based on a couple of stories that were out there circulating. Now we know stories about Bloody Mary or the hook in the door handle, the stories that people, especially young people, like to tell each other around campfires or when there's downtime. That's always like, well, a friend of a friend told me this and this type of thing, which are they make great stories. Well, there's one story that was shared to me by my brother. Actually, my youngest brother told me, he says, there's this ghost house out somewhere out by Illinois City. Now I grew up in a rural area, and some of the best stories are actually in rural areas. uh, because I don't know if it's because you're out there in the middle of nowhere and it's dark or what, but so there's this ghost house. It's a house that's physically not standing there, but sometimes at night, if you go out there and look, you can see this house. It's the outline and perimeter of a house. I don't know if it's a cabin or a real house, but it's out there in the country somewhere in the woods. And I've been trying to verify where this was. I asked somebody just recently, I said, "You ever heard about this?" And she said, "No." So, but nonetheless, it's
Actually,
not. I'm sorry.
actually, Ernie, I've got one for you. Actually, there is a story that's very common about the path to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, and they claim there's a farmhouse that appears sometimes there that isn't there along that path. So that might be part of where it came from, or it could be, if they have similar roots, the stories. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Isn't it something how these stories can have the similar roots and it can be in a totally different state or locale?
yeah,
And so
it's like the old game telephone.
yes, yes. So at least I'm not crazy now. So it's good to hear. So this is the idea that there's this house that can't be seen during the day, but sometimes at night you can see it. It's a farmhouse or something like this. So that's one side of this story. The poem is based on another thing that goes back to my childhood. Now, my maternal grandparents were on my mother's side. They were tenant farmers in Henry County, Illinois. Now, in the north, we say tenant farmers. In the south, it's sharecroppers. But they rented this land, and I used to visit them when I was a kid. And on this land, there was a big set of woods, a lot of woods. And it's the woods where my mother grew up, and it was really cool woods to go for walks in and so forth. We would have family gatherings. Well, these woods were near what used to be a stagecoach trail. And in history, this is probably in the 1830s, 1840s, nearby, about a half-mile away, Kelowna, Illinois. There was the Brandenburg Inn, which was really the hub of traffic, because the stagecoach went through there. The Brandenburg Inn, Abraham Lincoln is alleged to have stayed there, and it was a post office and a tavern and an inn where people stayed. Okay, so there was a little bit of history that is too far back for me to document. I've tried. So in these woods, there had been a house, and there were settlers, early pioneers or something like that. And one night, somebody paid them a visit. I've heard it was Indian, Native Americans, so whoever would have been around at that time. Now, this was after the Black Hawk War. Possibly a traveler who was off of the stagecoach trail, because there were robbers and bandits in those days. Colonel Davenport was murdered by river bandits, so there were some undesirables who traveled through the stagecoach trails and the river in those days, so both which were nearby. So this pioneer family was massacred, killed, the husband and his wife. The kid who lived there in the woods ran off to the nearby village, Kelowna, Illinois, to get the sheriff. But by the time they got back, the house was on fire and his parents had been murdered. So that is the story. There was in the woods, and I've heard this story from my aunts and uncles, that this allegedly happened. And there's this low spot in the ground where a cabin had once sat, a building. And then there was a story that the couple was buried under a pair of oak trees in the woods. They've tried to find these oak trees. So there's this, on one hand, you've got this Indian, or it was a murder of this settler and his wife. And then on the other side of this poem, I've written about, I thought, wouldn't that be cool if there was a ghost house, because this terrible tragedy had occurred, and it was on this farm ground, what is now farm ground. And so this poem, Spiritual Homestead, is about that. And I'm just going to read it for you now, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. It's not long. Spiritual Homestead. On our back 40, where nobody can see, a family of settlers lives on the edge of eternity. 'Twas the small town gossip for 150 years that kept their house standing in the cornfield clear. When nighttime comes, without warning, without error, the pioneers rebuild with blood, energy, and terror. Pastor White warned the kids to stay out of the woods. He said, "Some things in this world just can't be understood." Still, some folks go in and poke around. You can hear their screams all the way into town. I saw it one night. I didn't think it was there. A smoky silhouette against the cold midnight air. An old log cabin, but so plain to see, sturdy as all infinity. No cheesy campfire story could do it justice. No friendly dare could make me walk closer. The pigweeds beneath my feet kept this moment so real. It was a big deal. Dark and foreboding, it defied the modern age, and still marked time by the afternoon stage. They say it was burnt to the ground over a century back. The fire and bloodbath of an Indian attack made me chill. Well, it was cold out. Under a harvest moon, pioneer bones lay at rest, so close to me, in the churchyard or yonder beneath a pine tree. But tonight they shall sleep in the spiritual homestead they keep, season after season, without time, without reason, just the endurance that brought them here in the first place. They decided to stay. Behold, simple frontier splendor, immortal and true, shall burn down again with the morning dew. So,
yeah, I was trying to find it in the book. Oh, here it is. Yeah, we even got in the book, we got a little picture of a log cabin. I don't know if you can really see that, but there's a picture of a log cabin to go with the story, or with the poem. So figured that fit it pretty well. So is there more you'd like to talk about the poem, or?
No, it just seemed appropriate for Halloween that there's this mythical, legendary, haunted site where there used to be a house, and possibly why it's haunted. You know, when you get out in the countryside, there's a lot of Indian burial grounds that get stirred up, I think, and there were places where terrible things happened. You know, when I do research old stories and I look into newspapers from the 1800s, one thing's clear to me is people did terrible things back then too. You know, we think
Oh,
that
yeah.
the things are bad now because, you know, people kill their children and all these terrible things we see in the news now. But if you look at any newspaper in the 1800s, you know, people did crazy things then too. People lost their minds. You know,
I think the difference was then a lot of that news didn't get spread around as virally as it does now, obviously.
of course.
And so there were local stories. But if you actually look at the numbers, at least, you know, since like the 50s and 60s, you can look at the crime statistics from the FBI, and violent crime's actually down a lot from, you know, a few decades ago even. And I'm
Hmm.
sure there was a lot of violent crime way back when, obviously. I mean, you go back to the 20s, you had in Chicago, the mob, and go back even further. I mean, there was a lot of violence going on. So it's easy to it's easy to look through different sort of lenses and have everything here seem so much more, because we're living it, you know. So it's vibrant, it's in our face, whereas the other stuff just sort of seems more gray, and it doesn't stand out as much.
Hmm. And in the 19th century, you know, there's a lot of immigration, kind of like now. Uh,
Hmm.
and there was this mentality that, you know, the immigrants' lives were expendable. You know, if they're working in a digging out a railroad or working in the meat meat packing house. I mean, they get sick
Hmm.
and die, and you know they feel replace them the next day. And there's that mentality, and people would kill each other. You know, there were crimes of passion, and mental health back then. I mean, people didn't understand it really up until recently. So there was a great deal of you know, mental health issues, as there always has been. You ever see the book Wisconsin Death Trip?
I've heard of no, I've heard of. There's an album by that title that I've heard of. I don't think I've
Okay.
seen the book.
Well, it was a photographic book. A guy got a bunch of glass picture natives from the 1800s from Black River Falls, Wisconsin, and news stories and things. And these are stories of all these settlers and farmers that just did all sorts of heinous crimes back in the 1800s, or lost their minds. And
Hmm.
Wisconsin Death Trip. It's on Amazon. It's a pretty accessible book, but these are in parts of the country that didn't get a lot of attention. I don't think there were a lot of newspapers I've found, unless you get into a big city that might give coverage, because news traveled slowly, and news traveled by word of mouth. Uh, you know, obviously before internet, it was a very different thing. But imagine without even having telephones or modern forms of communication. So,
Yeah, and I mean, think about this too. How many people just disappeared? Because, you know, there weren't records like they had. You didn't have a photo ID. Somebody could go change their name and pretty much be accepted elsewhere, you know, if they went across the country or whatever. And you know, people would just go missing sometimes, and who knows what happened to them. I mean, the record keeping and stuff wasn't the same way it is now. So I think
oh,
there are probably a lot of these stories that just sort of vanished. I mean, what's the colony in the Northeast that just everybody was gone? Roanoke, was that it?
Roanoke, Virginia. Yes, that was in the
Yeah,
1600s. Yeah. Uh-huh.
everybody just disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to them. It could have been it probably was something horrific. I mean, usually people don't just up and move out without somebody knowing where they went to, you know. So something probably bad happened to them, but we don't know what. No, but probably nobody ever will, unless you come up with time travel and can peek in. But so yeah, there's a lot of that stuff around there. So you wonder why there are all these stories. You know, there's reason for that.
Yeah, with Roanoke, there was some speculation that some of them mixed in with the Indians and were absorbed into the Native American culture. but more likely they were killed or starved because there was so much famine with that
Yeah.
first colony. Very, very rough, and the winters were hard, and the Indians were not very trusting of the settlers, and vice versa. So,
With good reason, obviously.
right. Um, and I touched on that, the poem. If this was an Indian attack, um, that was not uncommon even in the early 1800s. Abraham Lincoln's grandfather in Kentucky was killed by Indians on his farm out back, just sort of ambushed. And ironically, Lincoln was there's been a lot of controversy here a year ago during the I'm getting off on another tangent here, but the Dakota Wars, where there were 250 Indians captured and sentenced to hang, and Abraham Lincoln pardoned all but 38 of them. 38 Indians were hanged for their atrocities committed against the settlers. And nowadays the critics are like, "Oh, that Lincoln, he hanged these Indians." Well, he pardoned a lot of Indians. He could have went with the U.S. Army's kangaroo court and hanged all of them, but he didn't, and that tells you what a compassionate, fair-minded man Abraham Lincoln was. I mean, the Indians killed his grandfather. He could have been like Andrew Jackson and hated the Indians and just wanted to hang every last one of them, but he said no, they've got to have due process unless the proof is that they directly attacked some settlers or one of our militiamen, then we're not going to hang them. So 38 were hanged, yes, in Mankato, Minnesota, but he spared the lives of a lot more of them. So this is coming from a person whose grandfather was killed by Indians. So
Yeah. Well, so moving on to other topics.
Sure.
You want to, so with Halloween coming up, you want to tell everybody what your costume was for yesterday?
Oh yes, my place at work goes all out for Halloween costumes, and so yesterday we had costume day, and I dressed up as the Penguin from comic book lore, the villain in Batman, Penguin. So I had the top hat, I had the orange cummerbund, the purple tie, I had the cigarette holder and the umbrella, and I mean, I was dressed to the nines, and I looked like the Penguin. And I'm getting at the point where I'm probably overweight enough to pull off the role, but it was a really cool costume, I'm told. And so I posted pictures on Facebook, and I decided to have a little fun with it and do something positive. I said, if for 100 likes, if I get 100 likes between now and midnight, just like 8 o'clock, I will give a check for $100 to Miss Carly's, which is an excellent charity. She does such good work with the most neediest people, and she's actively fundraising. She needs a lot of money. So I said, if I get 100 likes on my costume here on Facebook, I'll send her a check. And I don't think a half hour went past and people reshared it and so forth. I had 100 likes. So
I looked this morning. I think you had 180 something.
Yeah, and it's gone up. So I'm thinking about maybe I can do a little better than 100. But one of my friends, Tony Gasparini, said he'll match it. So
I saw that. I thought that was great.
It was cool.
And actually, I was going to tell you, if it's cool with you, what I do with these videos is I like to put the little Spooky Ventures header on it and a little Spooky Ventures tagline at the end. And then I put them up on Spooky Ventures as a spooky feature. And if it's all right with you, when I do that, I'll grab some of your pictures and put them in the video too, so people can see what your costume was, because I thought it was great.
Thank you. Yes. It kind of came together over the last week or so, and I got the accessories, and I was able to pull it off. Yes, and it's good to be part of Spooky Ventures. I was thinking about some of your other episodes and conversations about literary influences. Well, some of my early literary influences were comic books and spooky stuff. I liked the monsters and vampires and things like that from a very early age. One of my favorite shows when I was a kid, and I'm talking 6 years old, was Kolchak the Night Stalker. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah, we just got, they just released that on Blu-ray. We just got the Blu-ray collection of the series, and so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that series. That series was great.
Yeah. But that was a good show, and I just enjoyed reading comics and things, and that's kind of as I learned to read when I was a kid. That's what I preferred to read, because you got to read what you like, and that's always been one of my favorite genres. Now, as a writer, I really lean more towards nonfiction. It's fiction's fun, but I just I have a little more trouble with that, particularly the endings. So
Well, what I was going to ask you too, what we did with Spooky Stories, we did a whole group thing with Calvin Schwartz for his podcast thing, and you were invited, but you had other obligations that weekend or that week, so you couldn't do it. But one of the questions that Calvin asked everybody, and we had a conversation about, I want to ask you, what is your favorite Universal horror monster of the old classics, and why?
oh gosh, a monster, huh?
Mm-hmm. The old Universal ones, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Mummy. Uh, I guess Phantom of the Opera fits in there too.
Um, Boris Karloff's Mummy was pretty good. Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, I think the Bride would fit too.
She was hot. I liked her hairdo with the white thing. Alyssa,
You see a lot of there's been a lot of takeoff on that over the years, that hair thing.
there was a character I liked. It was Rondo Hatton, the creeper. That was a
Oh, the Creeper. Yeah, that guy. That was his real face too. He
yes,
had some kind of disease.
right. He had acromegalia, which had his face was enlarging features, I guess. So
Yeah.
he was he capitalized on that and made some films. Rondo Hatton. A few years ago, I met Basil Gogos, who did the artwork for Monster Magazine covers, and I got a signed print of Rondo Hatton. I'll have to.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, what would? Oh, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. I'm still trying to think of some other characters.
I was going to ask you too. What are some of your go-to Halloween spooky movies?
Oh, that I can answer. Remember Mad Monster Party? It was one of those kind of animated claymation.
No, I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Well, it was they're clay characters, and Phyllis Diller and Peter Lorre, and it was in the late '60s. It was kind of intended for kids. It was one of those claymation movies by Rankin and Bass. So
Oh, yeah.
they had the classic horror characters and their claymation. My other favorite is Plan 9 from Outer Space, which I've seen many times and memorized some lines from. I mean, people were scared of that stuff in those days, and it's one of those.
That opening monologue. Oh my God. That movie. The funny thing about Plan 9 is that movie makes so many lists as the worst movie of all time. Trust me, I've seen a lot worse movies. It's not a great movie by any means, but I've seen worse.
Yeah.
That's fun stuff.
Yeah, I like those kind of cult movies. There's another one I saw recently. It's more recent. It's called Tusk, and it was made by who that director that did Jay and Silent Bob and Clerks? Kevin Smith, is that his name?
Kevin Smith, yeah.
Okay, the movie Tusk is basically about this journalist who gets captured by this guy in Canada who kidnaps him and turns him into a walrus, performs surgery on him, and turns him into a walrus. It kind of borrows on the idea of the human centipede. Was that a
right?
Right. So it's good. It's creepy. It's crazy, and he turns this guy surgically into a walrus. I mean, it's called Tusk.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I've seen it, but I've heard of it. Yeah. So that's a cool that's one I should check out sometime. That sounds interesting. I've been looking for Plan 9 actually for a while because I haven't seen that in years. I don't know if it's on YouTube. It's probably public domain by now, I would think. I don't know. A lot of
Yeah.
those old movies go into public domain pretty easily.
It's pretty accessible, and of course, as the story goes, Bela Lugosi died, and Ed Wood replaced him with was it his wife's dentist, who was a head taller than Bela
Yeah.
Lugosi. And he did this whole
It
thing.
just stood around like this with the
Yeah, the cape,
That's
and
funny.
and just the stage props, which were very very low budget, and
Yeah, well, that's Ed Wood. Did you know? Talking about Lugosi, did you know he was buried in his Dracula costume?
Yes, I knew that, and I'd seen pictures of him in the coffin. It looks like Dracula just ready to rise up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's kind of crazy. So,
very sad. The end
so
of
what do
his
you?
life. What's that?
Go ahead. What were
Well,
you saying?
Bela Lugosi was a heroin addict, and at the end of his
Yes.
life, he really had a problem with that.
Yeah, he was a junkie. Yeah, he had a lot of issues. I think I don't remember what he died from, but I do think that the addiction probably, I mean, certainly hastened his death. I would guess that stuff's not good for you. So,
No, no, but that was his
um,
proudest achievement was being Dracula.
yeah,
Um,
which he almost wasn't going to be. They had wanted someone else for the part. I can't remember who, but they had wanted someone else for the part, and he was not their first choice. But I can't imagine anybody else in that role. I mean,
no,
yeah, lots of other people have done it, but I don't think anybody quite pulled it off as well as he did. Um, One of my all-time favorite lines from a movie comes from that movie, or at least from a horror movie, is when what's Dwight Fry's character. Now I'm drawing a blank on his name, but when he comes there and Dracula gives him some food and some wine, and Dracula's like, "I never drink wine." I love that.
now tell us a little bit about Dwight Fry. Most of us know the song by Alice Cooper, "The Ballad of Dwight Fry." Now, was Dwight Fry an actor, or was he a character in one of those movies?
He was an actor, and he's in quite a few movies. He was what the heck is his name in that? I can't remember the character's name in Dracula. He's the guy that Dracula turns into his crazy slave, basically. He calls him master, and he's like does Dracula's bidding, and he eats flies and stuff. And he's in some other ones too. I can't remember. I think one of the Frankenstein movies. I don't know if he's in the first one. He might be in the second one. But he was in a lot of movies like that. He was a quite a character actor, and he that the song "Ballad of Dwight Fry" apparently, from what I read, is sort of loosely based around him. But I think it's probably more loosely based around some of his characters than actually around him as a person. But he was um, he was something at the time. I think I don't know as much about it as a lot of movie historians do, but I know that he shows up in quite a few of those old films.
A supporting actor, kind of like Peter Lorre or something.
Yeah, I don't think he ever did any lead roles that I know of anyway. But I think that first one in Dracula, I think kind of cemented what people thought of him, because he's that character's something. He's like
Yeah.
constantly doing little things to kill and eat. They take his spider away, and he's not happy with that. So, and there's the whole scene right after when they come on the ship and everybody on the ship, all the crew is dead, and they come on and he comes out from underneath and he just looks so crazed, and that's a cool little scene too. I think that sort of cemented him as a great character actor who got a lot of those roles.
I'm going to have to read up more on him. I mean, I'm vaguely familiar with him, and of course, I know the song, but I'm going to have to read up more on that.
Yeah, that's actually my absolute favorite Alice Cooper song. So
Yeah, one thing you and I had talked about in the past was doing a collaboration of cover songs for Halloween of songs that were originally done by other artists, like Alice Cooper's song "The Black Widow," or John Zacherle's "Dinner with Drac," or maybe Monster Mash. But I think if I'm correct, we weren't able to do that because the made to order system wasn't in
I
place.
don't remember this conversation. I know you brought it up, and you know what? I know I was going to do a spooky a spooky music charity album at one time,
Yeah,
and
I think that was it.
okay, yeah, and but I don't think it probably would have gone with a lot of those old songs strictly because then you've got licensing agreements to
Oh
worry about, mechanical licensing and all that. But the idea, what you were right about, is the idea got scrapped for doing the charity album because Amazon stopped their media on demand service, which is the way I did the charity albums because I don't want to spend a bunch of money putting these together. And so that way you could put it out there. And what I did on both of them that I did one that was for the Rock River Valley Food Pantry, which was called We'll Sing for Food. And then we did one for the love of dog and cat, which was for the Noah's Ark. And both of those, I put them out on Amazon, and then I worked with the charities and made them the payees. And then I was completely out of it once it was set up. I didn't even have access to the account anymore. I gave them access, but that meant that when Amazon paid anybody for royalties, they got all the royalties. So I liked doing it that way because the other option is you can still do it, but you've got to put up a bunch of money up front and get CDs printed out, and then try to sell those. And I don't really want to put a bunch of money out up front. I'd rather just have them get paid as things sell. So that's not really a viable option for me anymore, unless somebody knows of a way, some other service out there that'll do that. Because I'm always glad to do another charity album. I like doing those.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun to help out. So if anybody hears this and knows of another system out there for that, let me know. But it has to be a no money up front thing because I'm not putting out my money up front to do it. But yeah,
Right.
I'm much better with giving my time and my work and stuff for a charity than money a lot of times because I'm kind of cheap. I hate to say it, but I'm kind of cheap with cash anyway.
Yeah, you don't want to put all this money up front and lose it because that does happen, and it can happen
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, and I think with those CDs, I think you have to. I don't think you can even buy 25 or 30. I think you have to buy a couple hundred of them. And I don't know about you, but I don't know where I can sell a couple hundred CDs. It's not like we're going out doing gigs like a band can have a merch table, but that's different. So, and I don't know. I think the outlay for those would probably be, several $100s. So,
Mm-hmm.
But so anyway, what are you doing for Halloween? Anything special going?
I was going to put on my penguin costume again and maybe greet the trick or treaters, what few trick or treaters I get out here. I was invited to someone's costume party, but we'll see. I'm going to reuse this costume because I put so much effort into it. I'm going to use it as much as I can.
Yeah. Well, you know what was funny about it, and it never clicked with me before, was when I saw just basically your face, and that it didn't click that it was the penguin. I thought you were the guy from Monopoly at first. And then when I saw the whole picture with the umbrella, it clicked. But it's like I never realized how much that penguin character sort of looks like the guy from Monopoly. Mr. Moneybags, is that what he's called, I think?
Right. And a couple other people had said that at first, too. Mr. Moneybags or whatever his name was. He had a monocle, of course, and he had a top hat.
Yep.
I believe Mr. Moneybags had a mustache, however.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that. You're absolutely right. But yeah, once I saw it pulled out and you had the umbrella, it's like, oh, now I get it. Did you find yourself going quack, quack, quack?
I did a couple quack quacks early in the morning. Yes. Maybe I would do that sound on a normal morning. Yeah. A couple people thought I might have been Mr. Peanut because Mr. Peanut had a monocle and a top hat.
Yeah, I can kind of see that, I guess. Although, I would think if you were going to do Mr. Peanut, as much effort as you put into it, you probably do makeup and stuff to make you look like Mr. Peanut.
Yes, I would have to have a very textured face and
Yeah,
look like a peanut, which is something I don't think I could pull off very easily.
Yeah, that would be a hard costume to pull off. You'd probably have to have a whole bodysuit kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You remember the old Penguin? Burgess Meredith played him on the Batman show. I did a little research on that and watched some clips. He did a pretty good job as the Penguin.
Yeah. I guess the new movie, The Batman's going to have Penguin in it. But I haven't seen it. It's going to have also Riddler, and I don't know who else. But I saw a trailer for that. Have you seen the trailer for that movie?
I saw that Colin Farrell is going to play the Penguin, and how that's going to turn out because Danny DeVito really had the stature to play the Penguin and was a creepy Penguin and did a good job. So we'll just have to see how this one turns out. I mean, I'll watch it because it's a Batman movie and just kind of see. It's neat to see different actors' interpretations over the years, especially of villains.
Yeah.
If you compare the Joker that Jack Nicholson played to the recent one with Joaquin Phoenix, was that his name?
Joaquin Phoenix, yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course you got Heath Ledger.
And Heath Ledger. Each one very different.
Cesar Romero, right? Yeah, Cesar Romero was in there.
Yes.
Now, who's your favorite Joker?
I got to say I really liked this recent movie with Joaquin in it. It was very dark and disturbing, and definitely not a fun comic book oriented Joker for kids. But I have to say I was entertained by it. To me, the worst movie is a boring movie, and that movie was not boring. It was very intense, and it was disturbing, and it was a commentary on our mental health system.
Yeah, I think for me, my opinion on it is a little different than yours in that I can see what your point. It wasn't boring, but I felt like I was watching a train wreck the whole time, which it was uncomfortable, which I guess is sort of what you were saying too. I don't think I ever want to see it again, but
and of course the Joker, he's been kind of tainted because if you recall, one of these mass shooters, maybe it was 10 years ago, was
Aurora, Colorado.
Yeah, and I thought to myself, boy, they're never going to do another Joker movie again, and of course they did. But that guy was dressed up as the Joker, so that really speaks to what
Yeah. I mean, for me, by the way, mine would have to be Heath Ledger. I just loved the way he pulled that off. I loved how he was so, I don't know, he was relatable, but he was also crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yes. As was the Joker. The character was clearly a psychotic.
Yeah.
And sadistic.
But, it's interesting because there were several people in the comic book who have been the Joker over the years. And I mean, several different, people. And so the one Joaquin Phoenix plays is a different Joker than the ones we've seen in the other movies and in the old TV series. A completely different character, but they're both the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
So you almost can't compare his to theirs because they're not the same person. It's two completely different characters who happen to both be the Joker, but
it was in a very different context. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It was a different.
Well, and they're actually, I mean, I can't remember now. I'm drawing a blank on those names too. I don't know what it is with me and names today, but they're actually, I mean, two completely different people. They're not even the same person as the Joker both times. All the ones before are what the heck is his name? Jack.
Jack
Uh,
Nicholson?
yeah, but it's Jack Napier, I think. Yeah, I think that's his name. And Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is a different character. That isn't even his name. He's somebody completely different, different background, everything. So they're kind of not the same character. I mean, they aren't the same character. They're different Jokers. Kind of like, if you follow Marvel, Iron Man for a while, when Tony Stark in the comic books, Tony Stark had a really, really bad drinking problem. And he had to quit being Iron Man. And and Rhodes, who is War Machine, took over being Iron Man for a while. So it's kind of like that. It's like two different people who are wearing the costume, and their costumes are even different. But there's my superhero comic geekdom coming
Yeah,
out.
yeah. And I
But
remember Tony Stark in the comic books was a wealthy, kind of arrogant businessman.
hmm which is what he is in the Marvel
Yeah,
Comics universe too. But they didn't really go down the dark trail of having him be an alcoholic, although he was in Iron Man 2, I think. He kind of went in that direction for a little while. He was not quite an alcoholic, but he definitely had some serious issues. Um, but yeah, that character went pretty dark for a while. That was one of the things I liked about Marvel back in those days. Now I haven't picked up I've heard Marvel's gone in some really odd directions lately, and I haven't actually picked up a comic book in a long time. But I remember back in the 70s, I mean, a lot of the DC characters were often what you see is what you get. Like Superman, he's this better than everybody, and Batman didn't really have the issues that he has in the movies, in the comic books in those days. And everybody was just sort of, I don't know, one dimensional in DC. But Marvel characters often had real problems, and they were more real characters, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, you had to worry about Peter Parker was,
I was
sometimes
just thinking.
failing.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was always, he was missing class because he was busy fighting crime, and so he'd fail these classes even though he was super smart, and he was trying to get MJ to notice him, and trying to keep his aunt from knowing who he was, and he had a lot of real problems. And then his aunt got sick, and and he was always having trouble paying the bills, and so Marvel characters tended to be more well-rounded, and they had real personalities and real life issues, and it's kind of what I liked better about them in the day. But again, I have no idea what either one of those companies are doing anymore. I haven't read a comic book of them for a long time.
the old stuff is the better stuff, I think.
Well, for me anyway, I don't know. I mean, people who grew up on the other stuff might feel the other way too, but I was I was a huge, huge, huge comic fan for a long time. I mean, I still am. I just don't collect it like I used to. Right. You know. But anyway, we certainly got off topic there. But anything else you'd like to bring up?
Anything going on in music that you like lately?
Um, Not that I can think of offhand. Um, Now the last one, I know you're a Blue Oyster Cult fan. Did you get the last album they did last year?
I didn't get a chance to hear that one. No, is it good?
Oh my God, you need to get it. It's probably one of their best albums. I mean, it's one of the more consistent albums. I'd put it up there with Fire of Unknown Origin in terms of how
Oh,
consistent it is.
yeah.
And the song The Alchemist, or no, Tainted Blood, I think Tainted Blood is probably one of the 5 best songs they've ever done. It's just such a good song. So yeah, by all means, you should get that one. It's really good. It was funny. I saw a post about it the other day, and I was like, yeah, that was my number one album for that last year. That was my favorite. I thought it was the best album of the year last year. So
Okay.
definitely check that one out.
Give that a
That's
listen.
that's a very impressive album. And there's a lot of horror-based stuff on there too. There's the story The Alchemist based on the Lovecraft story. The song The Alchemist based on Lovecraft's story. And Tainted Blood is actually about a vampire. So I mean, you got the horror angle on that one too. So yeah, it's an album well worth checking out. So that's that. Anything else you wanted to chat about?
Do you remember? Do you remember a few years ago? Since we're kind of on this topic of rock and roll and horror, Judas Priest did a concept album called Nostradamus, and it was a very long.
Nostradamus, yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever get a chance to hear that one? I think I listened to it once or twice.
Actually, that album is a very divisive one among Priest fans. A lot of people hate it. I know one of the guys who contributed to Horrifying Holidays, which is coming out next week. One of those guys, that guy, Glenn, it's his. It's the worst album in his opinion Judas Priest ever did.
Interesting.
I personally think it's my favorite album of theirs. It was them going into total progressive rock almost, and it's a pretty amazing album. I think I can see why a lot of Priest fans don't like it. It depends on what angle you want to look at, but I always liked, way back when they did Dreamer Deceiver, and Dreamer Deceiver was very proggy, and a lot of their early stuff was very proggy. Actually, Diane, my wife, just read Rob Halford's autobiography a few months ago, and she was telling me that he was a big prog rock fan back in the day. He loved Yes and a lot of those bands, and so I think that angle has always been part of the band. But I think, I got into Judas Priest early, and so kind of for me, I think there were only 5 or 6 albums out when I got into them, and for me, they were always a very creative band and willing to take chances and stuff. But I think people who came in later, like in the mid 80s, I think they just grew into the side where they were just that sort of almost, I don't want to say generic because they weren't really generic metal. But for a Priest, a lot of the music on those few albums, from like Point of Entry, no, not Point of Entry, from Screaming for Vengeance and Painkiller, and a lot of those songs are kind of interchangeable. I mean, they're sort of almost, they had a formula and they sort of played it. And I think that, if you came into that era and it doesn't fit in that formula, I can see why you might not like it as well. But for me, they were always willing to take chances, because I came into a different period of the band. And that album is just, I think it's amazing. I don't know. It's cool. It's definitely I don't think anybody would argue it's the most ambitious thing they ever did. But it didn't sell well for them, and I think they kind of, will never try something like that again because it just didn't go over well. But personally, I think it was great.
It was an experimental album for them, and I didn't hate it, but it's not something I listened to a lot. But it was a cool album for experimental purposes. And it, like you said, it kind of goes back to their early material, like Sad Wings of Destiny, which I thought was a great album. But it's not the same album of British Steel, and
No.
And like you said, the stuff that really made them commercially viable, which was some good heavy metal music, different from their earlier stuff, and definitely different from Nostradamus.
Yeah. And I think, since then, Firepower is. Have you heard Firepower, their last album?
I didn't hear that one. I just didn't get to that one. Is it good? Is that one that Halford's on?
Yeah, Halford's been on everything since Angel of Retribution, or I think that's the name of that one. He's been on everything since, I don't know, 2004. I think he joined back up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that was a year I covered Ozfest, and they were on Sabbath was headlining, but they were before Sabbath, and but the new one, Firepower, it's got some really, really good music on it, but they didn't take any chances with it. It's very, sort of by the numbers Priest. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some good songs on there, but it's not. They weren't breaking any molds or anything there. I think they sort of learned their lesson, and they're just going to kind of play it safe from now on. I don't know. I could be wrong though. Who knows? They may come out with another album that's completely different direction. I mean, you look at it. They did Point of Entry. Point of Entry at the time. I mean, people look at it back on it now, and it's just sort of considered a quintessential Priest album, but it was a very, very different sound for them. And in fact, I remember that was when they were doing the press for that album, because, I was a Priest fan then, so I followed everything about it. That was the very first time I heard the term progressive metal. It was applied to that album. So, I mean, that was kind of groundbreaking at the time. Nobody thinks of it that way anymore, looking back on it. But when you were part of it and sat there and watched it happen, it was very different. And I wasn't completely blown away by that album at the time. There's some great songs on it, but it was sort of the same way I am with Firepower, in that, some great songs, but it's not one of my favorite albums. But
Would you say that Iron Maiden is progressive metal?
certainly a lot of their newer stuff is. They've definitely gone in that direction. And I haven't really kept up with them. I think the last album I actually owned by them was Brave New World, which is what, 2000, 2001, something like that. But yeah, they definitely have moved in that direction over the years. And they had that kind of side to them all along. I mean, what's the Children of the Damned sort of has that sort of vibe. Way back in, that was on Number of the Beast. So yeah, I don't think they're definitely thought of in that regard, but they're definitely in that direction now.
And they've explored literary themes. I mean, they're still
Very much. Yeah,
really kind of
most of those songs are literary, I think, or a lot of them are. In fact, my favorite Iron Maiden song is "The Wicker Man." So that's a movie, I guess. Although, was there a book, Wicker Man? Do you know, or is it just the movie?
Was that there was a book? Was it Stephen? There was a movie.
The Wicker. There was a movie.
Oh, it wasn't a Stephen King title, was it? I'm not sure.
No, okay. No. And I've never seen The Wicker Man. I need to see it. I've heard great things about it, but yeah, I've never seen it. But
now, just to kind of wrap this up, because it is Halloween. Did they ever do the Rocky Horror Picture Show around here in Rockford? Now, when I grew up, they showed it at college, and I know they would show it at Davenport. The midnight showing. But was that ever a thing?
I wouldn't doubt it was, but I hate the Rocky Horror Picture Show, so I probably wouldn't. Okay. I've seen it once, and I couldn't stand it, so I wouldn't have paid much attention to it. But they may well have done that for a while. I think I remember it sitting at one of the theaters downtown for a long time, but I don't know. What's funny is I've not really said this in public or in an interview kind of thing before, but Diane and I do an almost Rocky Horror thing with Svengoolie every week. When they throw the rubber chicken at him, Diane throws a rubber chicken. We've got parts where we recite the opening bit every time, and then when he does his whole thing about selling the merchandise, they do that every week, and we're naming off lines from it and doing the hand gestures and everything. So it's almost our Rocky Horror.
Audience participation.
Exactly. So anyway, let's sort of wrap this up.
Okay.
And again, Ernie's poem, along with a lot of really great stuff, which we've talked about quite a bit in other interviews, and you can certainly look at the listing for it, Spooky Stories, and you can find that at lulu.com/spotlight/strange sound, or just go to GaryHillAuthor.com, and you'll notice there's a page for Tales of Wonder and Dread publications, and you can find them right there. There are links that'll get you the Goodreads stuff for all of them, and then the Lulu links to get you to buy them. So by all means, check that out. And happy Halloween, everybody. And thanks for joining us, Ernie. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
Of course.
Looking forward to seeing you in person one of these days.
Yes, it's been a long time.
Yep. All right. Well, take it easy, everybody. Happy Halloween.
Bye.
Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.